So let's switch to English because we have a pretty hot awaited panel discussion, and this is called Identity and Privacy, New Approaches and Innovations in a Post Third-Party Cookie World. We have a pretty crowded panel, so I'll just introduce our moderator. That is Nick Welch. He's the head of programmatic and publisher development at Integral Ad Science and chair. And yeah, he's pretty active in the IAB Europe Programmatic Trading Committee. So he's straight in the market. And Nick, I just hand over the digital microphone to you. And yeah, have fun with your panelists.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you for switching to English. My German's not great. So welcome everyone to the panel this morning. We've got 15 to 20 minutes, so I want to jump straight in. It's promising to be a lively conversation. We're talking about identity and privacy, and obviously the deprecation of third-party cookies, which is coming in 2023, has meant our industry is now leaning into alternative methods of identity for targeting. It impacts measurement, it impacts attribution. It is a complex problem. But the question is, are we there yet? IAB Europe is launching its guide to identity and privacy at the end of the week. But given we only have 15 to 20 minutes, I'd like to ask our panel to very briefly introduce themselves and kick off the conversation by answering this question. What's your take on the current state of the industry? And Morwenna, can I go to you first?
Yeah, of course. So hi, my name's Morwenna Beales. I'm the VP of Global Strategic Partnerships at ID5. And so the question is, where are we on the identity journey? And crucially, I think, are we ready? I think broadly speaking, we're getting there. On the tech and the platform side, we've seen some, early adopters and many who were not deterred by the change in the end date given by Google. We saw huge and continue to see huge adoption from the publisher side, and also increasing interest from advertisers direct, which is great and really interesting. From our perspective, we've really advised partners to use this as a window, as a chance to test and to learn and to feed those learnings into a broader identification strategy. And we've got some great results for that. We're very focused on educational work. So one clear message, and that is the time is now. So act now, especially considering there's a huge opportunity being missed today on Safari and Firefox. So yes, there's still work to be done, but I think we're probably getting there.
Awesome. Thanks, Morwenna. And Ben, Morwenna obviously talked about good publisher uptake from an ID perspective. Can I go to you with the same question?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Nick. Nice to be here today. My name is Ben Hancock. I am head of programmatic trading at CNN International. So I think for me this is really a huge topic. It's about the future of the open web. Third-party cookies, they're absolutely integral to what we do in this industry. They enable us to target, to measure, to report, and whatever happens, that's going to be very different in the future. I think with respect to what Morwenna said, I do think that a lot of progress has been made. Certainly in terms of the availability of tech that's out there. And I think certainly people have got a much better understanding of it. But I think from our point of view, it's there's a lot more complexity around this now. It's become much more fragmented. And I think while there's been progress in terms of technology, I think we're still quite away from reaching a consensus in terms of how we're going to take the next step forward. So I think we really need to see some movement in that direction. I think kind of the key challenge there is that where there's so many solutions to choose from, so many options, it's really challenging for publishers to kind of double down on one of them because we just don't know what's going to be adopted by the buy side. I think specifically from a publisher perspective, don't forget that first party cookies aren't going anywhere. And from my experience, I think the market is looking a lot more to publishers now because we've got that direct relationship with our audience, and we're able to put solutions together to kind of combat the challenges.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. And Tanya, can I come straight to you?
Yes, of course. My name's Tanya Field, and I'm the co-founder and chief product officer of Novatiq. We deliver ID verification services using telco networks. I basically don't disagree with anything that's been said by either Morwenna or Ben. I think now is the time when people need to look to test and learn, but I think people also need to take into account that a successful ID strategy needs to be able to reach audiences that are both on the authenticated and the ghost web. And I think that's effectively something that's not touched on enough. A lot of the authenticated logons are absolutely great and they're needed and they give you depth of understanding of who the user is. But at the end of the day, I think there's also a complementary environment where people will never want to log on, where you still want to know who the same person is. You don't know who they are, you don't know what their name is, but ultimately you want to recognize that it's the same user. And that's where I think the publishers can play an absolutely huge part, because if they're able to string together their first-party cookies so that they can recognize the same user, even though they don't know who they are, then they get a complementary view of the whole of the user base, in-depth learning, and just knowing that it's the same user. And that obviously improves the customer experience, which is key in this, because ultimately it's down to the customer to decide what they want us to do.
Thank you, Tanya. And Thomas, obviously representing the technology side of passing this information through the SSP pipes. Can I ask you to briefly introduce yourself and again your view on the state of identity as it stands?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. Well, my name is Thomas. I'm a VP Publishing of Xandr. We are a buy and sell side product. I'm also chair of the TCSD group at IB Europe, so I'm into privacy a lot. So what we see right now is a lot of competing solutions that exist, like deterministic, where the ID is not going to change much, also probabilistic, and other solutions. And the question is, which solution is going to be the most important in which ecosystem in each marketplace? So, and this is heavily influenced by all of the privacy changes that happened, because other companies believe that, for example, contextual doesn't need consent from the user, but it needs if you follow some of the DPAs. So there is a lot of development and a lot of uncertainty, and this is why it's a transition phase. The market doesn't know which solution is going to be the solution that is going to gain the highest market adoption. So that's the difficulty for the market players.
Thank you, Thomas. And Raman, if you have anything to add to that, obviously introduce yourself and answer that question.
Hi guys, good morning. My name is Raman Sidhu, SVP at Verve. We're a consumer-first advertising suite, bringing together data, technology, and media. I'd like to take it from the advertiser's perspective, as I've been spending a lot of time with brands and agencies over the last few years. And there is a widespread consensus in Europe, at least, when we look at the entire open internet and what we've been using today. Around about 90% of it or so is expected not to have any form of identifier. So the majority will be anonymous. And of course, the remaining 10% will be coming from publishers, for example, which is known customers and consumers. So what are we losing when we lose third-party cookies and mobile IDs? Effectively, the ability to track consumers across websites and apps at scale. And as such, the use cases which we've been using mostly is retargeting and multi-touch attribution. And those won't be viable because they don't offer the same level of scale with any bringing together, I guess, unless they're in a specific ecosystem. So that's the biggest loss. I guess we've gotten used to following people around the internet. So what we're left with is first-party data. And what many people are calling contextual today. One of which, according to the marketers, poses more privacy risk to the other, depending on how it's used, as email addresses and phone numbers are considered to be PII. However, both are needed. From a publisher perspective, the use cases are very different to a marketer's perspective. And it's our job to rebuild these capabilities and enable business continuity for the open internet in this particular endgame.
Perfect. Thank you, Raman. And some really good answers. I think we've all largely said, and Morwenna, you said action needs to be taken. Ben, you said that reaching broad consensus, but there's still a lot of fragmentation in terms of the tools. Tanya, you talked about a need for a combination of authenticated IDs and being able to track across the ghost web. Thomas, you talked interestingly about the fact that that there's still going to be complex and difficult to solve for in a truly privacy compliant way. And Raman, you finally touched on the fact that the biggest loss is going to be multi-touch not being viable, that being our biggest loss. So with all of this in mind, it still feels to me like there's a lot to solve. So we said action needs to be taken, but given the fragmentation and given the fact that we're all coming from a slightly different perspective, what actions can be taken? And Raman, I'll start with you first.
I've got to be honest, realistically speaking, it will differ based on who you are and what part of the ecosystem which you represent. What I will say is that we took the viewpoint of building better advertising by capturing intent, emotion, and attention without any reliance on third-party cookies, advertising identifiers, or personally identifiable information. So we enable brands to use first-party data as a seed to better understand their audiences, and then use AI based on context, cohorts, and metadata to deliver any form of brand goals. So effectively, what needs to be done is people need to start testing a handful of different solutions which they think are most suitable for themselves, because it will take a little bit of time for them to find what is the perfect kind of formula that delivers their growth and protects them from the deprecation of all form of identifiers.
And Morwenna, same question to you. Would you obviously see yourselves as one of those handful of solutions? But what action should be taken?
Well, action is the primary word there. I think lean into the solutions that are available, test and learn and feed those learnings into your approach. And I think really, see this as an opportunity to build a better framework for the industry to operate off. We talk about identity as a challenge, when I think we should be describing it as an opportunity, because cookies have been broken forever. We're not solely talking about browser restrictions and regulation here. Of course, they're hugely important, but we're also talking about performance and an opportunity to generate additional revenue. So as an industry, I think we need to do more education, more testing, and perhaps have more alignment from pubs, to tech, to brand, and to agencies. And I just want to, like slight detour, but I just want to echo some of the thoughts on the last question around that need for scale. I think that the solution that you work with has to offer scale, and so looking at both deterministic and probabilistic methods to generate that scale is going to be a really crucial part of how and who you lean into.
And I'm keen for this to be a discussion. So, guys, if you want to jump in at any point and comment on each other's points, please feel free to do so. Tanya, what's your view on Morwenna, on what Morwenna's just said, and Ben? Obviously, publishers are a big part of that conversation. Keen to hear your feedback.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. Thanks, Nick. I think. In terms of what Morwenna said about looking at this as an opportunity, absolutely. I think everyone's known for a long time that third-party cookies have not been the best solution. There's obviously been quite a significant backlash from the general public against them. They kind of hit mainstream news when certain unwanted and dubious practices have been uncovered. And I think in terms of looking at this as an opportunity, as Morwenna said, we've really been on the front foot with this at CNN. We're in a very fortunate position. We've got obviously a huge brand, huge global reach, a really strong audience. We've got great insight into that audience because we've got that direct relationship. Specifically in terms of what we've done and what we can do in terms of solutions for our clients. As we've said, first-party cookies aren't going anywhere. So we've invested heavily in the audience solutions that we've got. Also, we've invested in our own ID solutions. Again, we're fortunate being part of Warner Media that we've got multiple brands, and we can stitch together profiles across those brands. And also that enables us to build scale as well, which is again quite unique for a publisher. And I think to pick up on something that Raman said about contextual, I think actually the kind of the development and almost the efficiency and the power of what third-party cookies could do meant that as an industry we kind of let contextual sit on kind of the back burner a little bit. So I think it's probably been a little bit underinvested in, but certainly we're seeing that start to change now. And again, at CNN, we've invested heavily in our own contextual tools. We've got all that expertise on our own content and how we can best deliver audiences around that. And we found that's been really powerful and really kind of big uptake from our buyers. And I kind of mentioned earlier that that we're in quite a fortunate position. And I think one of the kind of net outcomes of this is we're going to see some spend shift, or kind of the continuation of spend shift away from the kind of the long tail towards premium publishers, towards better content where we can offer these kind of solutions ourselves.
Thank you, Ben. Thomas, I mean, so what role would you play in this, given what Ben's just said? I'm conscious that obviously CNN's a large brand, large installed user base, but is it still big enough to deliver against the KPIs that the brands want? I mean, I guess my question is there scale there to take action?
Oh yes, there is enough scale. So what's only missing is the third-party cookie. And that's not everything that is important. So for example, if you have like a homepage event on a website, on a publisher website, a lot of measurement is still possible, like viewability measurement and also delivery measurement. So it's just about the not focus too much on the addiction. We are addicted to a third-party cookie, but focus on that what's still possible, and be happy that measurement and also maybe not the end-to-end attribution modeling, but a lot is still possible. So focus on that. And then our role would be to, as a platform, make sure that everything that's working, that's been bought from an advertiser will be measured on a publisher website and vice versa. So creating an environment where still measurement and attribution is working.
Raman, Tanya?
I'd like to pick up on something that Morwenna said earlier, because I think it's about action, but I think it's about action across the board. So I think there's been a lot of debate about which ID is going to work. Shall we support it? Will the buy side, the sell side, will everyone support through the line? And ultimately, if action isn't taken through the line, then it's very, very difficult for anyone to test and learn with anything, right? So I think it's really important that my expectation is that it's not going to be a single ID solution. It will be an environment which becomes interoperable. And therefore, I think it's really important that the whole of the line start testing and learning, not publishers in isolation, not buy side or sell side in isolation. We all need to come together so that end to end, the test and learn can occur. And I think that's when it becomes much more powerful. And I think at the moment, it's not coming together to the extent that it needs to really test all of these things end to end.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I find that we're having to stitch together the end-to-end solution for the client, even though it might not be all our thing, because quite often, as Thomas said, there is addiction to cookies, but that addiction is quite often reliant on the measurement of the outcome. And if we're able to deliver other forms of measurement or incrementality without the use of cookies, that effectively forms a 360 solution. So that's definitely a lot of what we're focusing on these days.
Perfect, thank you. I'm conscious we've probably got 1 minute remaining left for this panel, but there's that one question that kind of piqued my interest that's come through the chat box, which is, what should we be thinking with regards to the privacy sandbox solutions? Does anyone have an opinion that they can share or would like to answer that question or take that question?
Well, I can go with that. So Privacy Sandbox is just a handful of tools, and it's working within one browser. So it's not the ecosystem. It's just a browser. And also, as we heard with Flock, there was a consent needed. That's why it never got launched and tested in Europe. So even with Privacy Sandbox, there are limitations. There are limitations in terms of anti-competition. So not everything is allowed. There's a limitation in terms of when consent is needed or not. So I think it's important to test it, to focus on it, and to see if it's working. But also, I think all of the panelists mentioned it's just one of various solutions. It's not the solution.
Yeah, I would also, echo that. I think when you look at that solution, you need to think about performance and whether or not, it will be as efficient as the current user-based solutions. I think you need to think about differentiation, having a competitive advantage, and with an aggregated data set. I think dependency, we're already, very dependent when it comes to Google and Apple. So really a lot of considerations there when you look at that as a solution, whether it's going to be effective.
Perfect.
There's also the fact that it's just another black box, and we as an industry have a huge opportunity in being able to provide more transparency, not just in programmatic pipes, but also in data, and opening up the black box to provide more insights for the ecosystem. And I think that could be a big differentiator for us.
Wonderful. I'm going to take this opportunity to thank everyone for what has to be the fastest panel in the history of panel conversations. Really good content, really good discussion. And thanks for tuning in. And I think the key takeaway here is test and learn, take action. Inaction is not going to give you the answers or what you need. Just jump straight in. So handing back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That was a great summary actually from you. So I don't have to add anything. I just want to say thank you to all our panelists. And yeah, that was maybe the fastest panel ever. But it was great content. And thanks for everybody who was participating. And yeah, see you at some next events or at this weekend or wherever. Thanks. Have a great day, everybody.